So I find this when we swear in new recruits and we encourage their family and friends to come. I think a lot of them are afraid that as soon as they get trained, they're going to be going out the door and overseas somewhere. And so one of the biggest myths with reservists is you don't have to deploy overseas ever. You have to volunteer as a reservist to deploy overseas. You can be asked domestically to help with things like the pandemic that we had a few years ago, forest fires, floods, ice storms, things like that. We do all the domestic response, but deployments overseas, that is a myth. You have to volunteer to go over.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Curious Conversations, a podcast for kids by kids. I'm Xavier, and I usually host this podcast with my twin sister Emma, but today I'm flying solo. This episode is actually part of a grade 10 Canadian history project, and I'm really excited to share it with you. If you are a grade 10 student in high school in Canada, you know the course I'm talking about. I hope this episode helps you connect what you're learning in Canadian history about war, peacekeeping, and Canada's role in the world. And for everyone else not in grade 10 history, I hope this episode offers you some insight into a part of Canada's military history. Today I'm interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Jason Robertson, the commanding officer in the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada. He's been in this regiment for over 30 years, and now leads about 250 reservists across two armories in Cambridge and Kitchener. I feel very lucky and thankful that he took time out of his schedule not only to sit down for this interview, but also to give me a tour of the historical armory in Cambridge, which is over 100 years old and has deep roots in our community. It's also just down the road from my high school, Rockaway Mennonite Collegiate. In this conversation, we will talk about the history of the regiment, the role local soldiers played in the World Wars, and what it means to be a reservist today. The best part is Lieutenant Colonel Robertson shares some of his own stories about how he started as a teenager at the very bottom rank, how he trained all over Canada, and how he eventually became the highest ranking soldier in the Waterloo Region. A big part of this episode focuses on Bosnia and Operation Palladium, a NATO peace mission that isn't always covered in our history textbooks. You'll hear what it was like for a young Canadian soldier to deploy to a conflict zone, help delivering humanitarian aid, and work with local people trying to rebuild their lives. It was a real privilege to be able to talk with Lieutenant Colonel Robertson, hear his stories, and experience a piece of Canadian history firsthand by walking through the armory with him and learning about its past. Now, let's head into the armory and to my conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Jason Robertson. Welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for letting me have a time today. So we are doing this interview at the Historical Armoury in Cambridge, Ontario, and it's the headquarters for the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada, and you're the Lieutenant Colonel?
That's correct.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit about yourself and what inspired you to join the Canadian Armed Forces?
Okay, so I've been in this regiment for 33 years. And, I think it goes back to all my friends are 1-2 years older than me. We all started in this building as 12-year-olds as cadets, and I just kind of followed them into this regiment. It was just kind of a natural progression for me.
So how many of your friends joined with you?
There was 3 of them that joined.
How did you become a commanding officer?
Through many, many, many years of courses all over Canada, and you have to put 2 to 3 years of time in between each rank to get promoted. So it's a combination of time in rank and then courses and qualifications that you have to get.
Okay. So what is a lieutenant colonel?
So a lieutenant colonel in Waterloo Region is the highest rank in the region. There's only one of me. And I'm the commanding officer. So I've got 250 soldiers between Cambridge and Kitchener and 2 buildings. This one here that you're in, and then another one beside the Kitchener Auditorium.
So your main responsibility then would be to just watch over all the people in the regiment?
Yeah, I kind of guide them towards our mission of. I think we're going to get into this in some further questions, but growing this regiment and making sure that we have a strong military presence in this area.
That's awesome. That's so cool to be the highest rank. Wow. So I would like to know more about what it means to be a reserve, but first I have a couple history questions. So can you tell us a little bit about the history of the armoury and the history of the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada?
Okay, so the building itself is about 120 years old. And there's other places that no longer exist in town where the armory used to be. But this regiment started in 1866, so we're 1 year older than Canada itself. And so in Cambridge here, which was called Galt at the time, the Highland Light Infantry was here. And then up in Kitchener was a unit called the Scots Fusiliers. And then in 1965, those two units merged and became the Highland Fusiliers of Canada. And then in 1998, that summer, we had a big parade in Kitchener where we got bestowed the name Royal. So we became the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada in 1998.
Okay. So this group, has it always been like reserves?
Yes, other than World War I and World War II, where we mobilized more than one battalion of soldiers out of this area, we've always been reserve.
Mm-hmm. So people did participate in the First and Second World Wars from these buildings and around this area?
Correct. So we have 29 battle honors, which I'll show you on our regimental colors. We can go up there and take a look later. But we participated in World War I, World War II, the war in Afghanistan, and then every United Nations and NATO conflict that you can think of. And I can show you, again, plaques that show all those.
So this regiment, is it just made up of people from the Waterloo Region?
So I'm going to say the majority of them are from the Waterloo Region, although we have quite a large contingent from Brantford and Guelph, and then people as far away as St. Catharines, Stony Creek, and Toronto.
Before we keep going, I wanted to pause and highlight some of the history Lieutenant Colonel Robinson shared on our tour of the armory. As he mentioned, the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada traced their roots back to 1866, where the 29th Waterloo Battalion of Infantry was created, in what was then called Berlin. That means the regiment is actually 1 year older than Canada itself, which became a country in 1867. Fun fact, Chris Hatfield's great-grandfather fought in both World Wars and was a regimental sergeant in World War II with the Highland Fusiliers, and his photo hangs in the officers' mess. The local armories are more than just old brick buildings. They're community landmarks where soldiers have trained, paraded, and prepared to deploy for over 150 years. One of the most famous moments in this regiment's history came during the Second World War. In Normandy, France, on July 8, 1944. Soldiers of the Highland Light Infantry of Canada fought a brutal battle to capture the village of Peronne from German forces. The attack was successful, but it came at a very high cost. The battalion suffered hundreds of casualties in a single day, which is why the fight is sometimes remembered as Bloody Peronne. Today, the regiment continues to honor the soldiers who fought and died there. They remember the capture of Peronne through ceremonies, battle honors, and regimental traditions that keep these stories alive for new generations of soldiers. So when we talk about this regiment, we're not just talking about the uniforms and marches. We're talking about real people from our area who played a role in some of the most intense fighting of the Second World War. Now, let's hear from Lieutenant Colonel Robinson on what it means to be a reservist. What is a reservant and how is it different from being a full-time soldier?
So the big difference, I would say, is a regular force is going to live on a base where we all live at home. A reservist is a part-time soldier, so typically 12 days a month or less, and most of us have a full-time job or are students, and we do this on the side.
So you said that they merged with a different group. Is that the only big change that has happened to this regiment since it's been built, I guess?
Definitely, that's the biggest change back in 1965. But there's been some minor ones along the way, but that's the most major one. Yep.
So, what's a daily life like for a reservant today?
So your typical reservist parades one night a week and 1 weekend a month. So that would be the typical training, and then depending on where they are. So if they prayed out of Cambridge here, they're probably newer in their military career. They're learning how to properly wear their uniform and do foot drill and basic soldier skills. Whereas if they're up in Kitchener, they're doing more advanced training. We have mortars and machine guns and all kinds of different weapons and equipment up there. So it's definitely more advanced up there. It depends geographically where you parade.
Okay. So now that we've talked a bit about the RHFC, I would like to talk a bit about your story. So what was your first experience in military training like?
So my first real experience would be the summer of 1994. I probably the first time I'd ever shot a gun. I threw grenades that summer. I went into a gas hut. I was rappelling off the side of a cliff. So definitely a big eye opener and pretty exciting first summer.
And where did you train?
So that year was in Meaford, but my training's been Meaford, Borden, Petawawa, Saint Jean in Quebec, Gagetown out east. Pretty much almost every base in Canada I've done a course at.
And out of all of the places you've been, what and where was the hardest one or part of the training?
That's a good one. I'm going to say 1996 in Meaford, I did a reconnaissance patrolman course. We started with over 50 people and we only graduated 7. So probably the most physically demanding course I'd ever been on.
And so what was your favorite training?
Another good one. I think my favorite training before I deployed for Bosnia, I did 6 months of training up in Petawawa. So it was more than just weapons and tactics. It was learning the culture of the country I'm going into, language, religion, things like that. So it was a good mix of training that I really enjoyed.
That must have been fun. So when you were done all your training, what was your first job in the military?
A rifleman in a section. So a group of 8 to 10 soldiers. And I was bottom of the bottom. So I started at the bottom of the barrel in this regiment.
And you've grinded your way to the top?
Yeah, so I went right to the top. I went from private to corporal to master corporal to sergeant to warrant to master warrant to chief warrant officer. And at that point, I thought I was still young and had more to serve. So I flipped over and became an officer and was a captain, major, and now a lieutenant colonel.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's a pretty unique stream. Not many people do both sides, the officer and the NCO.
One of Lieutenant Colonel Robinson's deployment was to Bosnia in the 1990s. Before we hear about Bosnia from a soldier who was actually there, let's quickly look at how that conflict started, a bit about Canada's role in it, and how it changed the map of Europe. After the Second World War, Bosnia and Herzegovina was one of 6 republics inside a larger country called Yugoslavia, where different ethnic and religious groups lived together under a communist government. When that system began to break apart in the early 1990s, several republics voted to become independent countries, and old tensions started to rise. In Bosnia, a referendum in 1992 led to the Declaration of Independence. But many Bosnian Serb leaders rejected this, and with support from Serbia, launched a violent campaign to carve out territory for a Serb-controlled state. The result was a brutal war from 1992 to 1995 that included sieges of cities and ethnic cleansing. Canada got involved as part of the international peace efforts. Canadian soldiers first deployed under the United Nations as peacekeepers, trying to aid convoys, monitor ceasefires, and support safe areas during the fighting. After a peace deal called the Dayton Accords was signed in 1995, Canada joined NATO missions to help enforce the agreement, separate former warring sides, and create safe conditions so people could rebuild their lives. The war also changed the political map. Yugoslavia, which used to be one big country, eventually broke down into several independent states, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Slovenia, North Macedonia, and what later become separate countries of Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo. Now that you understand a bit more about the conflict itself, let's go back to the conversation and hear what Bosnia was like from someone who actually deployed there. So you also went on active duty in Bosnia in 1998 during Operation Palladium, I think it's called.
Palladium.
Palladium?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So the conflict in Bosnia isn't something that is always taught in schools. So what would you like students to understand about what was happening there and why Canada got involved?
Okay. So I was on Operation Palladium Roto 2, so the second rotation into that country in 1998. The big reason that Canadians were there is there was a civil war in that country. It started in Croatia, merged over into Bosnia, and then over into Kosovo after, and all due to the breakup of Yugoslavia. And the main reason I would say that we were there is there was a lot of refugees and displaced people that Canada was trying to get back to their homes or find homes for. We helped stabilize the region, providing humanitarian care, enforcing the ceasefire agreements that were set out there. And then we allowed peaceful elections to take place as well.
And how many men were sent over from Canada to Bosnia?
So they rotate every approximately 6 months, and it was a group of 2,500 men and women.
What was it like being deployed in active duty?
It definitely made me appreciate being a Canadian a lot more. I had my 21st birthday over there. Yeah, definitely. I was an even prouder Canadian when I came home, and it was a big eye opener. I'd never been on a plane before. That was my first plane ride into a war zone.
Okay. And so what was the typical day like in Bosnia?
So typical days, we did a lot of foot and vehicle patrols, just going across the countryside, in our area of responsibility. We did a lot of humanitarian aid deliveries. So there were people that needed help with pots, pans, food, blankets, things like that. We helped rebuild schools and playgrounds for the kids that had been destroyed during the war. And then we monitored the armed forces in that country as well.
And you said that people were there for 6 months. Is that how long you were deployed out there for?
Yeah, approximately. So I was there 7 months. I was January to July of 1998.
Okay. And so what's one story you like to tell people about your time in Bosnia?
Yeah, so one story that really hit home was I saw an old woman going to the grocery store. She had a wheelbarrow full of money, and she came out with one bag of groceries. So it just showed, their money wasn't worth a lot, and the number of households that the women had to do all the work because the men had either deceased during the war or were too injured to plow the fields and help out.
Wow. How did it feel being in a conflict zone so far away from home?
Yeah, just like I said before, I think excuse me, it helped me appreciate Canada a lot more. But definitely the big thing is, missing family and friends, for that length of time.
So did you meet or work with any of the local people in Bosnia?
Yep. So we had local interpreters that we used. And then a lot of the kitchen staff and cleaning staff were all locals that we employed as well.
What is a lesson or experience from that mission that has stayed with you since you came back?
I think the lesson would be, just appreciate all the things that you have. And I think it goes back to that woman with a wheelbarrow full of money that, the optics of it looks like she's rich, but, when she only comes out with one small grocery bag, everything's not about money.
So to appreciate what you have?
For sure.
Mm-hmm. And so you said that this place has helped all over the world. Have you gone on any other travel missions with the military?
So I've probably done exercises in every state in the United States. And then our sister regiment's based out of Scotland. And I think I've been there 4 times. I'm heading over there in a week and a half, I think, for 10 days.
You said you've been to almost every state. What was your favorite one to, I guess, go visit?
Kentucky, I think. I had a really good exercise in Kentucky. They had some nice sandy beaches that we crawled through and did some really cool ranges.
That must have been fun.
Yep.
What is a sister regiment?
So our sister regiment is somebody that we partner with and share a lot of traditions and history. And so my sister regiment is the 2nd Battalion Royal Regiment of Scotland, the Royal Highland Fusiliers. And we're the Royal Highland Fusiliers of Canada. So we both wear the same white hackle in our headdress. And so other than our camouflage pattern's a little bit different, we wear a lot of the same accoutrements, the same tartan, a lot of the same pieces of uniform.
And how long has that regiment been your sister regiment?
So that regiment, you know, I told you near the beginning that our regiment's been around since 1866, and theirs has been around 200 years older than us. Yeah, so we're the new stepchild.
And you've been a sister regiment for the entire time?
Since our beginning, yeah.
Okay. And so you said you've been over there 4 times?
This will be my 4th time this month. Yeah.
How many times have they came over to you, if they have?
Easily as many.
Easily as many.
Yeah, they come over every 2-3 years.
And do you have a favorite memory of them coming over or you going over?
So I just had my counterpart, the commanding officer of their regiment. I just hosted him here last spring, and it was really nice having him here as a guest speaker, sitting beside me at all of the events.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any? Do you only have one sister regiment?
So we do have. We're loosely connected to another one. They're also in Scotland. Mm-hmm. So our sister regiment, the 2nd Battalion, they're based just outside of Edinburgh, and then the other regiment is a reserve unit like ours, and they're called 6 Scots, and they're based out of Glasgow.
Glasgow, okay.
Yep.
And so, from all your experiences, how has the military shaped you into the person you are today?
Oh, I think it's definitely helped me with my time appreciation. I've got 2 boys in rep hockey. I've got a full-time job, and I do this almost every day of the week. So I'm really good with managing my time.
I also play hockey. I love it. So leadership seems to be a big part of your job. So what qualities makes a great leader in the military?
The first one I would say is initiative. You got to be able to, think on your toes and think up good ideas. I think people look up to you as the leader if you're trustworthy, accountable, and self-aware as well. Like I know my own strengths and weaknesses, and I have the luxury of saying I've been there right at the very bottom, and I know what they're going through. So I take that into account whenever I'm coming up with ideas.
So, how do you help the younger soldiers learn leadership and teamwork, and I probably assume, do many of them look up to you from how your career path has gone?
Yeah, I think a lot of them appreciate the career path I took. And I would say the way we help them is through courses, lots of training exercises at least once a month, and then mentorship. We've got a good mentorship program here where somebody that's been there, done that, they come down and help the younger leaders get to where they are.
Have you ever trained new soldiers coming in? Do you train them? Yep.
So as soon as we're done this interview, I'll go show you. I've got 40 high school students somewhere in the building that are doing training. They're here Monday to Friday during the day. And then on weekends, I've got another course running here and one in Kitchener. So this time of year, especially in the spring, we have new recruits starting. They are guaranteed a full-time summer job. Their first 4 summers in the Army nowadays, a luxury that I didn't have when I started. And so by the fall, most of these soldiers will all be fully qualified, and they'll all move up to Kitchener to work out of there.
And so what is the minimum age requirement to asked to join this regiment?
So it's typically grade 11. If you're under 18, you need your parent's signature, and at 18, you can sign your own permission slip.
And what is the age maximum if there is one?
So the maximum age right now is 60. We wouldn't take anybody over 57 typically, because it's going to take a couple years to get you fully trained. So we usually we don't have many people coming at 57, but I guess that would be the maximum age that I couldn't say no to.
So what is the oldest person that you've trained here?
I've definitely trained people in their 40s, which is so late in life to start. I guess we should have talked about this at the beginning. So my regiment is a light infantry regiment. We have a couple trucks, but those trucks are for carrying really, really heavy things. The rest of it's all on our back, and we walk everywhere.
And so, what is the difference between training someone who's 18 versus someone who's in their mid 40s?
Nothing. So we are very inclusive, and we would never delineate. It's the same standard, no matter if you're a man, woman, black, white, 40, 20. It's all the same.
Do they treat it differently? Have you noticed someone who's a bit younger, a bit more like excited to be there, or are they both just like there like and excited?
Somebody who later in life is joining definitely has the eagerness to succeed. There must be a reason why they're coming that late in life. And those people, the ones that are successful, I find they fast track through the leadership very quickly because one, they don't want to be in the trench too long with their knees and back hurting. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, they've got a lot of life skills and leadership qualities that they've probably learned in their life by the time they're in their 40s that they bring to us.
Okay. And you said you were a light infantry regiment?
Yep. So that's our trade. So in Southern Ontario in our brigade, so my brigade stretches from this area here, Guelph, Cambridge, Kitchener, Hamilton, and then all the way down to Windsor, Chatham, Sarnia. So that's just my brigade. There's another one in Toronto that reaches up to Barrie and Owen Sound, and then another one in Ottawa. So there's 3 reserve brigades, each with 12 to 16 regiments in Ontario.
Okay. And so in closing, I have a few broader questions about Canada's military today and the importance of Canadian military history.
Okay.
So how do you see the role of the Canadian Armed Forces in today's world?
So I see it as emerging. I'll say that. I see if you've turned on the news anytime in the last few months, the Chief of Defense Staff is on there, and she's given us a lot of money that was never available to us, a lot of brand new kit and equipment that's coming, and a lot of growth. She wants to grow the Army. So, for example, there are 22,000 reservists, I believe, in Canada, and that number is going to shoot up to 100,000 in the next few years. So my regiment alone is looking to quadruple the size of in the next couple of years. So I think with those numbers, we're going to be able to go to more places in greater numbers and have more effect on the areas that we go to.
Are you excited for a number of people to come in now?
I definitely am, but I'm on a 3-year term usually in this position, so I don't think I'll see it come to fruition. I'm going to definitely see it grow faster than I've ever seen it during my career, but I'm not going to see the end result while I'm in uniform.
So how long have you been the lieutenant colonel then? If you said it's a 3-year term?
So I've been a lieutenant colonel a year and a half.
So
I'm halfway through.
Okay. Yeah. So what happens next after you're done with this?
I don't know. Yep. So we'll cross that path closer to the end. I'm getting there. Yeah, I don't know. I think by then I'll have 35 years in, and I'd be okay retiring and maybe catching a few more hockey games, missing a few less birthdays and stuff like that. It's a huge commitment, and I think 35 years I've served my country.
So you said that it's 3 years to be a lieutenant colonel. Is that the same for every other promotion you get? You have to stay 3 years, or are there longer or shorter terms?
Shorter. So in the senior officer ranks and the very senior NCO ranks, it's usually 3 years between each rank. And then some of the lower ranks, it's only 2 years between ranks.
Mm-hmm. And so what was the shortest and then the longest time in between promotions for you?
Yeah, to get through all those ranks, I didn't stay in one very long. I think I was a corporal 4 years. Mm-hmm. So that might have been the longest I was ever the same rank. And the shortest would be this one. I've only been a year and a half so far.
Did you have a favorite position?
I think I'd be a fool not to say this one. I'm at the top of the pyramid right now and get to make all the decisions. So, there's been other positions along the way that I really, really enjoyed. But, this one here, I'm not just making suggestions. I can actually make change.
Mm-hmm. So, what is a myth about joining the military or the reserves?
So I find this when we swear in new recruits and we encourage their family and friends to come. I think a lot of them are afraid that as soon as they get trained, they're going to be going out the door and overseas somewhere. And so one of the biggest myths with reservists is you don't have to deploy overseas ever. There's as much of a chance your mom being sent as a new reservist. You have to volunteer as a reservist to deploy overseas. You can be asked domestically to help with things like the pandemic that we had a few years ago, forest fires, floods, ice storms, things like that. We do all the domestic response, but deployments overseas, that is a myth. You have to volunteer to go over.
And when you first joined the military, was there like a myth that you were thinking of before you joined?
No, again, there wasn't much thought into it. I just followed my friends and had a long lineage of family members that had served in the military.
So why do you think it's important for students to learn about Canadians' military history?
I would say it's important for them to learn about the Canadian military history because it's going to help them understand how Canada evolved into an independent nation, as well as how we earn global respect. So I think they would find in their research that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, Canada was a leading source for the United Nations and well respected.
So what advice would you give to young Canadians who might be considering joining the reserves or the military?
So I would definitely tell them it's a great source of employment. I know people have trouble finding jobs these days, and we're always hiring. It may not mean a lot to people of a younger age, but we have a great benefit package, and you actually get a pension as a reservist. So I've never heard of a part-time job that gives out a pension. And again, to 17 and 21-year-olds, it means nothing, but I wish I'd known about that. Having a pension that young is fantastic. Education, we help out with bursaries and grants, and we provide free leadership training. Actually, even better, we pay you while you're on that leadership training. So those are courses and skills that you can take with you when you're done your time in the military that can help you in civilian life.
What would you think would be better for someone at a younger age, to join the military or to join the reserves?
Well, the reserves is part of the military. Mm-hmm. I think it depends on where you're at in life. So joining the regular army is not an option in grade 11. You need to finish high school, and you should probably think about post-secondary school. But during all those years, you could be in the reserves and already start your military career, start your pension. And all the courses that we do are the exact same courses that the regular army does. So if somebody in my organization were to join the regular army, which a handful of soldiers do every year, all their courses are transferable, and they go in at the same rank and same qualifications that they had here.
So they don't have to restart and do training all over again?
No. Nope.
That's good.
It does sound good, but those courses are quite lengthy, so you have to manage it around your full-time job or your studies to get those qualifications. It's a lot easier for a person that it's their full-time job and that's all they have to do.
Have you trained people in the military and in the reserves?
Yeah, there's a lot of our courses have a mixture of full-time and part-time soldiers on it. And a lot of my courses, definitely later in my career as well, are a mixture of full-time and reserves. They go on the same courses.
Thank you so much for the time and doing this interview.
All right. Thank you for this interview, and I look forward to our tour.
I do as well. Thank you so much.